Have you ever thought, I do so much more around here than he does? Or wish that you could feel more like a team or like you had an equal partnership? If so, I want to share something that completely changed the way I think about marriage. I was reminded of it recently because I was completely out of commission with a terrible migraine for almost a week. And what happened while I was lying in a dark room forced me to confront a belief that I'd been carrying for many, many years. By the end of this, I hope that you'll never think about a 50-50 marriage the same way again. Welcome to the Softening into Love podcast. I am Laura Amador, a relationship coach for wives, and I'm so glad that you're here. So, I recently had one of the worst migraines of my life. I actually don't get them that often, but this one was bad. For the first 6 days, I could barely function. I felt like somebody had hit me with a hammer right in the middle of my eyebrows, right in my forehead, and the whole right side of my face and my eye was just throbbing. Every sound felt painfully loud. It was torture. And no matter, I was taking Tylenol and ibuprofen, and it was doing absolutely nothing. So all I could do was lay in a dark room and have a compress on my eyes and just try to block out all the noise as much as possible. I was miserable. All that to say that my husband really stepped up and stepped in big time. He was still working and taking care of the kids and cooking all the meals and just everything. And so as I started to feel a bit better and kind of come out of my hole, um, I I had I guess I had expected, or I didn't have expectations really, but I wouldn't have been surprised if it was just survival mode in the house. I was kind of expecting to find, the house pretty messy, and um because our family was kind of in survival mode, right? We were down a whole adult. And so everything fell on my husband's shoulders. And so I was shocked when I came out of my migraine hole to find that actually the house was spotless. He had done a whole deep clean. Every corner was organized and sparkly. The meals he had cooked weren't like survival meals of, here's a peanut butter and jelly for lunch. They were like beautiful meals. The kids told me, they had gone out every day and played in the backyard soccer and had been helping with the gardening. And, anyways, everything had functioned beautifully without me. And I felt surprised and very grateful. But if I'm being totally honest, I also felt a little bit, I felt a slight discomfort of like, wow, like he did even better than I normally do, right? I felt admiration. I was very impressed. And again, I can't say enough. I was so grateful. But yeah, I did feel like, oh, like maybe I'm not as needed around here as I thought I was. Like wow, like A plus. He mommed harder than I normally do. He just did so amazing that it left me feeling a little bit inadequate. There was like this self doubt, or like, I don't know, that discomfort of feeling like, oh, they got along just perfectly fine without me. And so as I sat there drinking, my first cup of coffee in the morning, and the first real meal I had had in nearly a week, I realized that those uncomfortable feelings that I had were, they had to do with this feeling of needing things to be 50-50 in order to be comfortable. Because 50-50, there is something very comfortable in that. There is something very safe feeling in that. And I realized that it came down to feeling in control. Like 50-50 gives this illusion of control, of comfort, of ease. And honestly, this goes way back to even when I was a kid. I remember dreading group projects as a kid. Whenever the teacher started talking about group projects, I would immediately, oh, no, please, no. And if the teacher gave the option, I would always choose, I'd rather do the project by myself. Even if it's more work, I don't care. I loved that I only was accountable to myself. I loved knowing that I was going to get the credit for all of it. And I loved knowing what to expect and being in full control of everything, because the more control that I have, the safer I feel and the better I felt, right? So, yeah, I would prefer it, even if it meant doing double or triple the amount of work, give me the control every time. That was me for sure. And so I took that same group project mentality into marriage. But of course, marriage is not a group project where all the work can be equally divided. Marriage and life is messy, right? The unexpected can happen. And as long as as long as love is hinging on needing everything to be equally divided and to be 50-50, and we're both pulling the weight equally all the time, then that is a recipe for disaster if that is what a relationship is hinging on. And I'm totally honest here, that is how I approached my relationship for a long time, for many, many years. I wanted things to be equal. I did not want to feel like I was pulling more than my fair share, right? I didn't want to be doing more work because then I would feel resentful. And I spent a lot of time feeling resentful early on in my marriage because I was scorekeeping. I was looking at everything that I was doing and looking at everything he was not doing. Not necessarily what he was doing. I was forgetting to even look at that. I was just looking at what he was not doing and comparing that to everything that I was doing. And I would give myself the gold star every time and look at him and his efforts and just deem them inadequate. On the flip side of that coin, I also wanted to feel valued. And so I didn't want to feel like I wanted to feel like I was doing my fair share and doing a good job of it. And so that's that discomfort that I felt when I had the migraine, because I was out of commission completely for nearly a week. And I really had to rely on my husband and from him, receive everything that he was doing. And that's a vulnerable place to be. And that was that discomfort, feeling like, oh, okay, I'm not in control now at all. And actually, I get to choose to trust, right? That's an opportunity to trust. But back in the days where that was really hard for me, it felt incredibly scary and uncomfortable to be put in a position where, oh, now I have to trust other people, just like the group project. Oh no, I have to trust my teammates or my peers that they're going to do a good job too. Oh, no thanks. I'd rather just trust myself and be in control of everything. So it was this big lesson really that I had to learn. But honestly, it took me years to realize that I was treating my marriage like a group project and approaching it as if, okay, you're going to do this, I'm going to do that. We're going to pull our fair share. I'm never going to do more than my fair share, and you're not going to do more than your fair share either, because that makes me uncomfortable, and I'm not going to do more than my fair share because that makes me resentful. Right? So it was dependent on this very fine line of things have to be 50-50 in order for me to feel happy, in order for me to feel like I'm not being taken advantage of, but also that I'm not owing anyone either, right? So it was like I needed this perfect balance. In other words, I needed control. And yeah, feeling so grateful and so taken care of during that time when I had the migraine, I have to say, it really increased my feelings, and it always does, right? Whenever I'm put in that vulnerable position of needing to receive or needing to be taken care of because I'm not able to partake or contribute as much, once I'm able to move past that feeling of discomfort of needing to be the vulnerable receiver, I find that every single time it increases my feelings of goodwill towards him, of respect and admiration for him, and a desire to be close and connected with him. And important moments like this would not even be possible in a marriage that required equal partnership at all times. And that's the thing, right? Marriage is not a group project at school where everything can be equally distributed at all times. Um, Although, that might seem like, oh, that's the ideal. And I'm also not saying that one person should be carrying, all the weight on their shoulders all the time either. But I am going to get to actually what I think is such a more productive and more effective lens to look at through marriage rather than the 50-50 perspective. Years ago, I actually heard a choir singer explain how a choir can hold one note for an incredibly long time. I am no singer. I always wish. Okay, I do sing, but I was not blessed with a beautiful Snow White Disney princess voice. I wish I was. But I have friends that have these beautiful, oh, just charming voices that I could just listen to the timbre of it. Oh my gosh, just I have friends with gorgeous voices. And one of my close friends, she sang in a choir for many years, and she still does occasionally. And yeah, she was telling me, she was explaining to me how a choir can hold a note seemingly forever. The secret, she shared with me, is that no one singer holds the note forever, right? It gives the illusion that the note is being held forever and ever because one singer will pause to breathe and then joins back in when they're able to. And then another singer takes a breath and joins back in, and then another, and so on, right? So whenever a singer needs to take a breath, they do so and then they rejoin. And in this way, that note is able to be held as long as the choir wants to hold it, seemingly, on and on and on. And it's a beautiful, strong note, right? Melody that they hold. That relationship that the singers have with each other is trust. It's trust, right? And in that way, the music never stops until the song is over, right? But the music can keep going forever and ever, and it creates that beautiful harmony, that beautiful melody. Now imagine if one singer suddenly yelled, "Hey," right to the person next to them, "you've taken 3 breaths in the time that I've only taken one." And then that singer, needing to defend themselves, started calling out, "Well, I held that first note way longer than you did. So it took a few breaths to be able to refill my lungs and catch up," right? And now they're back and forth and pointing fingers at each other, right? The whole song would fall apart. And as I was thinking about this and reflecting, I realized that was exactly how I had approached my marriage. I wasn't just participating, I was keeping score. Who did more? Which in that time in my lens, I always thought it was me. Who sacrificed more? Again, always thought it was me. And who needed the break more? Oh, always thought it was me, right? I'd look over and be like, oh, how dare he take a nap in the middle of the day, during his lunch break? When I'm here, I have a break and I'm washing dishes or, finding some way to be efficient. Um, yeah, I would always look over and resent his self care or resent him taking care of himself or resent him finding time for enjoyment because I wasn't doing that for myself. And so here's what I learned through my own experience as a wife and also coaching many wives over the years. Marriage stops feeling like love when it starts feeling like scorekeeping. Now, I do want to be really clear. I'm not saying, of course, that one spouse should carry everything while the other contributes nothing, right? Of course not. That's not healthy. Um, and that would be exhausting, right? But I do think what I see time and time again, most starting with my own experience, but also with so many of the women that I speak to, is that many of us accidentally overlook entire categories of contribution because we're so focused on what isn't happening. We're so focused on lack. We're so, so often we have so many complaints and feel like there's nothing to be grateful for when in reality, there's so much to be grateful for. And there's another piece to this as well, right? The choir only works because each singer actually takes a breath. And the thing is, so many wives, we never do. We keep pushing, we keep over functioning, we keep sacrificing because we feel like if we do stop to take a break, the song will end, right? Everything will stop. The house and the momentum of our lives will screech to a stop. And so we keep going. We bypass the breath we desperately need to take until we become exhausted. And we think that that's somehow going to make the song of our lives stronger and continue on. But in reality, all that does is guarantee that we're going to pass out, right, from exhaustion, that we will not have the resources to be able to have a deeply connected marriage or to be able to have a calm and peaceful life, that we're just going to be exhausted. And a lot of that, it comes from fear that if we stop and take a break, everything will come to a screeching halt. And fear, it's a lack of trust, right? It comes from a lack of trust. And so often that lack of trust comes because we have all the evidence that we are on our own in this, that that he won't have our back, or that things aren't going back to the 50-50, things aren't equal, or it's not a partnership, or, I am alone in this, right? And that can lead to so much pressure and so much resentment. And that's why taking that breath is so important. It's not selfish. A lot of us struggle with thinking, okay, stopping to take a breath. In other words, I'm talking about self care, right? That stopping to take a breath is all self care. It is part of making beautiful music. It's part of having a beautiful marriage and a beautiful life. It's an act of trust, a necessary act of trust if what we want is a connected marriage. And it's an act of faith if you're in the boat with so many wives, and also me in the beginning, where you're afraid that if you stop, the song will stop, right? That you are alone in this, that you are carrying the brunt of the weight, right? It becomes an act of faith as well. I love the saying that courage is not the absence of fear, but it's being afraid and doing it anyways. And so, really, it means accepting that everything does not depend only on you, that everything doesn't fall on your shoulders, that you are indeed on a team within your marriage, even if it doesn't feel like it yet. Now, I want to address the question, right? Should equal partnership be the goal in marriage? Should 50-50, is it a problem if things aren't 50-50? And this is an interesting question. Like, is that the goal? Is that the ideal? And I think it's interesting because coming back to the group project, it sounds like it would be, right? It sounds like, well, that's fair and that's what would be right. And that's what would help things function so that everybody can thrive, right? And this is where, reflecting on my experience with the migraine, I don't know if that's so much should be the goal. I think that there's other goals that can actually be so much more powerful in creating a beautiful, strong marriage where everyone can thrive. I think a joyful marriage is built when we stop obsessing over what the other person is doing or not doing, and we start honoring ourselves. We start trusting and taking that leap of faith that enables us to be able to stop and take the breath when we need it. And also choosing to notice the ways that our husband is already showing up instead of constantly keeping score or giving more focus on our complaints than what there is to be grateful for. Now, does that mean, okay, gosh, now I'm stuck, I'm uh, continuing to carry the weight while he cruises? No, what I'm talking about here is agency, right? Looking at what is on your plate and what is there that shouldn't be, maybe. In other words, things that are on your plate that feel like you have to do them or otherwise no one else will, that are causing you to be exhausted and depleted and resentful. Maybe those are I can'ts. Maybe those are things that you have done a disservice and a dishonor to yourself by taking it on, and therefore a disservice to your marriage by a complete a complete assumption that if you don't do it, he won't either, and therefore no one will do it and it won't get done. Now, again, coming back to evidence, usually when we have these fears, it's because we already had evidence built up from the past, for sure, right? And so your feelings are valid. But in my experience, so long as we continue to live in the way that supports our beliefs, we will call in more of what we already believe, whether that's negative. And if you can relate to feeling like, oh, if I don't do this or if I honor my limits, then no one will do it, then you may be able to identify that within yourself, like, oh, I am living through my beliefs, then you're just calling in more of the same, right? Likewise, when we start to focus on the good that is happening, we call in more of the good. And so, yeah, that's definitely one of the first places to start is honoring your limits. And the second is agency over your joy. The singers in the choir usually, you know, they can either show up because they've accepted to do so and are there just trying to get through it, or they're there because they enjoy singing. They love singing. They love singing in community and in a group. And while we can't control what the people around us do, we always get to control our own experience and decide how we want to show up, how we want to experience something. I am reading currently with my daughter the book Anne of Green Gables. And in it, um, it's at the very beginning. Anne, if you haven't read the book or you don't know the story, she's a little orphan girl. And she finally gets adopted. But what she doesn't realize is that the adults who are adopting her actually asked for a boy. They didn't want to adopt a girl. They wanted a farmhand. And so when she arrives and finds out that actually they want a boy, not a girl, they're returning her to the orphanage. Of course, her heart is completely broken. But the drive in the horse and buggy is so beautiful from this these people that were going to adopt her from their house to the train station that's going to send her back to the orphanage is so beautiful that she makes up her mind that she's going to enjoy it. And she says, I find that when you make up your mind firmly that you're going to enjoy something, you can enjoy it. But you have to make up your mind firmly. In the same way, I get to make up my mind, perhaps firmly, as she says, but we always get to make up our mind and decide whether we are going to show up and sing our part and enjoy our life and enjoy our self care and create joy in our lives, or if we're going to wait for our husband to do XYZ before we can experience joy. And yeah, the most beautiful choirs aren't made up of singers who never stop to breathe, right? They're made up of singers who trust the music enough to begin again. So that's what I would love to leave you with today, just a little reflection. Not, yeah, that's perhaps what a joyful marriage really is, right? That it doesn't need to be 50-50. That making sure that everything is always equal is actually creates expectations and comparison and that scorekeeping that's actually so much more detrimental to connection. Instead, giving yourself permission to breathe when you need to and when you want to, trusting that you don't have to carry everything alone, taking that, making that act of trust, making that act of faith, and choosing to notice the ways that your husband's already showing up instead of keeping track of the ways that maybe it currently looks like he isn't. Because what we focus on is always what increases. Now, if this resonated with you, I hope that it did. I have a free guide that walks you through the very first step to reigniting connection in your marriage. It's simple and practical, and it's the place that I would encourage every wife to begin. And if you're ready for more than information, you're ready for step by step guidance and coaching and support of a community of wives who are also committed to restoring connection in their marriages, I'd love to invite you into my Connected Wife coaching program. Inside, I walk you through the process of rebuilding connection, practicing the intimacy skills, and creating the kind of marriage that you truly long for. You'll find the links both to the free guide and to the coaching program in the description. Thank you so much for tuning in, and until next time, keep softening into love.